Amid the thick layers of snow blanketing Tsarskoye Selo during the harsh winter of 1917, the Alexander Palace stood silently as a quiet witness to the collapse of a dynasty that had endured for 3 centuries. Here, just a few dozen kilometers from the seething unrest in Petrograd, lay the favorite home of Emperor Nicholas II and his family. A graceful neoclassical palace built by the architect Giacomo Quarenghi in the late 18th century, with its vast corridors and private gardens where the imperial family once found peace amid the gathering political storms. Tsarskoye Selo, or the Tsar's village, had long been a symbol of Romanov opulence, with the nearby Catherine Palace evoking the golden age of Elizabeth and Catherine the Great. But now it became a gilded prison for the last emperor. Nicholas II, the man who had once ruled an empire stretching from the Baltic to the Pacific, was reduced to Colonel Romanov, confined with his wife Alexandra Feodorovna and their 5 children, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei. That winter, snow fell heavily on the domes and columns of the Alexander Palace, obscuring the traces of their former royal life when the family would stroll through the park, enjoying the fresh air and simple family moments among ancient trees and frozen lakes. But now, windows were painted over to block outside views, and guards patrolled relentlessly, transforming what had been a private paradise into a fortress of isolation. Nicholas, with his calm and patient demeanor, spent his time reading books and chopping wood in the garden to stay fit, while Alexandra, the German-born empress with her profound faith in destiny, cared for their son Alexei, who suffered from hemophilia, a hereditary condition passed down from Queen Victoria that caused him frequent agony. The elder daughters, the beautiful and well-educated Grand Duchesses, assisted their mother with sewing and reading to their brother, maintaining an almost normal family routine amid increasingly tight restrictions. They grew vegetables in a small garden, held lessons and prayers, striving to preserve their dignity despite the gradual humiliations from their guards. The roots of this tragedy traced back to the preceding years, when the First World War turned the Russian Empire into an exhausted war machine, with millions of soldiers dying at the front and civilians starving in the rear. Nicholas's decision to take direct command of the army in 1915 left Alexandra managing domestic affairs, but Rasputin's influence and military failures eroded royal prestige beyond repair. The February Revolution erupted in Petrograd, with strikes and demonstrations spreading rapidly, forcing Nicholas to abdicate on March 15, 1917, ending 304 years of Romanov rule. Initially, the provisional government planned to send the family to England, where King George V was Nicholas's cousin, but political pressures and British reluctance derailed the plan, leaving them under house arrest in their beloved Tsarskoye Selo. That harsh winter, with cold winds whistling through the long corridors, seemed to foreshadow the dark fate awaiting them, as forged letters and rumors of rescue only heightened the quiet anxiety within the family. The Alexander Palace, where Nicholas had been born and raised, now stood as a symbol of decline, where a great dynasty slowly faded into the white snow. The months at the Alexander Palace stretched from spring into summer 1917, as the snow melted and the gardens bloomed, yet freedom remained a distant dream for the Romanov family. They maintained their daily routines with remarkable resilience. Nicholas walked in the restricted park, chopped wood, and conversed with the guards, trying to foster human connections despite being treated as prisoners. Alexandra, frail in health and consumed by worry for Alexei, spent most of her time with her son, reading the Bible and keeping a diary that recorded her reflections on fate and faith in God. The daughters, affectionately known as Atma, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, helped their mother with household tasks, sewing clothes and tending the vegetable garden, turning simple activities into sources of joy amid captivity. They held lessons with their tutor Pierre Gilliard, played games, and took family photographs, the last images showing serene smiles on their faces despite the darkening future. External pressures mounted as Kerensky's provisional government faced Bolshevik uprisings, making the family's detention a sensitive issue. By August 1917, the decision was made to transfer them to Tobolsk in Siberia for safety from the chaos in Petrograd, and the family left the Alexander Palace for the last time on the night of August 1st, boarding a train with modest luggage and a profound sense of parting from what had been home. Tobolsk offered relative freedom in the spacious former governor's house, where they could walk and attend church services. But the October Revolution changed everything, bringing the Bolsheviks to power and turning them into true prisoners of the new regime. The Siberian winter enveloped them in severity, with the Tobol River frozen and biting winds piercing the soul, mirroring their deepening isolation. By April 1918, as the Civil War erupted and white forces approached, the Bolsheviks moved the family to Ekaterinburg, an industrial city in the Urals, where they were confined in the Ipatiev house, a merchant's home surrounded by a high wooden fence and renamed the Ipatiev House of Special Purpose. Conditions here were far harsher: windows sealed, food rationed, and guards rude, often shouting and monitoring every move. Nicholas remained composed, noting the weather and family health in his diary, while Alexandra suffered from the guards' coarseness toward her daughters. Alexei, the frail boy, was often bedridden, cared for in turns by his sisters. They upheld daily prayers, drawing strength from their Orthodox faith. As news of the war and advancing white armies heightened tension, the new commandant, Yakov Yurovsky, tightened discipline, confiscating jewelry and limiting outside contact, turning their final days into a chain of constant unease. The deeper cause of these transfers lay in Bolshevik fears. The Romanovs could become a rallying symbol for the opposition, and as white forces neared Ekaterinburg, the decision to eliminate them came from Moscow, though Lenin and Sverdlov later denied it. Forged letters from loyal officers were sent to deceive them, but the family, with faint hope, still prepared for the worst in patient humanity. On the night of July 16, 1918, the atmosphere in the Ipatiev house was heavy with ominous silence as the Romanov family retired after a long day awaiting news from outside. Suddenly, Yurovsky woke Dr. Botkin, then the entire family, informing them they must prepare to move for security reasons as white forces approached Ekaterinburg. Nicholas, Alexandra, their children, and 4 loyal retainers, Dr. Botkin, cook Karatonov, footman Trupp, and maid Demidova, slowly dressed, taking a few personal items, with the Empress and daughters sewing jewelry into their clothing for protection. They were led to a small basement room with wooden floors and plastered walls, where Yurovsky told them to wait for a photograph to prove they were alive. Nicholas carried the weakened Alexei in his arms. Alexandra sat on a chair with Anastasia beside her, the other daughters standing behind, all calm despite anxiety. Abruptly, Yurovsky read the execution order from the Ural Soviet, and the firing squad, comprising Russians and Latvians, burst in, opening fire in the cramped space. Gunshots echoed. Smoke filled the air. Nicholas fell first. Alexandra and the children tried to shield one another in the chaos. Bullets ricocheted off the sewn-in jewels, temporarily saving some, prolonging the execution with bayonets and close-range shots, turning the room into a hell on earth with cries of pain and pooling blood. Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, the young women who once dreamed of futures, fell beside their mother, while Alexei, the 13-year-old boy, witnessed his father's death before his own. Dr. Botkin and the loyal servants shared the same fate, demonstrating devotion to the end. Afterward, the bodies were wrapped in cloth, loaded onto a truck, and taken to the nearby Koptyaki forest, where they were stripped, burned with gasoline and acid, and hastily buried in a shallow pit. The efforts to conceal the crime reflected Bolshevik fears of international outrage and opposition, but also underscored the era's brutality. The direct cause was a central order to prevent rescue, as white forces were days away, and the Romanovs might have become a symbol of monarchical restoration. The result was the definitive end of the dynasty, with no survivors, though rumors of Anastasia's escape persisted for decades. The basement room of the Ipatiev house, now only in historical photographs, became an emblem of history's cruelty, where a humane family was erased in darkness. The tragic end of the Romanovs in Ekaterinburg not only terminated a dynasty, but also left a profound legacy on the fragility of power and humanity amid historical storms. Tsarskoye Selo, with the Alexander Palace as their first place of detention and now a museum, reminds us of those final months of isolation in the Tsar's village forgotten under winter snow. Here, amid elegant corridors and peaceful gardens, the family strove to maintain dignity, praying and loving one another to the very end, revealing profound humanity in adversity. The tragedy lay not only in the brutal execution, but also in the initial oblivion. As bodies were hidden and news distorted, only Nicholas's death announced, while the family's fate was shrouded in secrecy. In later years, rumors of survivors, especially Anastasia, spread, but DNA eventually confirmed all had perished. The Ipatiev house was demolished in 1977 to erase traces, but today the Church on the Blood stands on the site, honoring them as passion bearers canonized by the Russian Orthodox Church in 2000. Their legacy is a lesson in the consequences of war and revolution, when an ordinary family, Nicholas devoted to his kin, Alexandra dedicated, the children obedient, became victims of grand history. Tsarskoye Selo today, with its restored palaces and parks, invites visitors to reflect on the end of an era where architectural beauty contrasts with human tragedy, reminding us that power may crumble, but compassion and faith endure in memory.